So let me read this email. This is from somebody who is a Patreon contributor, or he's a new one anyway. And I spoke about him a couple weeks back. I referred to him as John. You may or may not remember the live call-in show. It depends on whether or not you're a loyal fan and regular listener. I posted a follow-up live stream message where I didn't play my call with him, but just my response to his email, because I thought it went, off track pretty quick and wasn't really, worth playing. And I want to read this email from him because I want to respond and give him my take. I already sent him an email, but I want to respond to the email on air as well, in the hope that he'll respond in kind maybe in the future. All right, so first he says, thanks for taking the time to evaluate the issues we talked briefly about. Again, you'd have to go and listen to the live stream. I believe it's the one titled Guy. He's concerned about his feminist exes indoctrinating his daughters. So it's labeled. You can go and listen. I wasn't prepared to discuss myself on the show, so my tone and answers were not real well thought out, and I had not discussed these issues with anyone previously, so it was tough for me to answer your questions without giving it some thought, and I don't believe I put enough thought into it while being impromptu on your show. Right. Well, you couldn't speak in the here and now. Want a time to think up answers? I don't know. That seems more like the response of somebody who wants to tell me what they think I want to hear, as opposed to being honest. I mean, if you're really going to be honest and open with me, it should be easy to answer in the moment. What's 2 plus 2? 4. Is it dark or light outside? Dark. I mean, how hard is it to be honest in your answers, okay? If somebody wants to think about answers, it's probably because they want to come up with some kind of contrived response that will keep the person as far away from finding out the truth as possible. So I don't buy that explanation. Anyhow, he goes on to say, my grandmother was tough on me. We talked about his grandmother before. Essentially, she was real tough, not a nice broad, essentially took on the responsibility and roles of being a mother, but wasn't actually a mother. So, She lost 2 husbands to lung cancer. What the fuck is she marrying guys that are smoking 4 packs of cigarettes a day? What's going on here? They both died of lung cancer and had to raise 4 boys and a girl, 1 girl on her own. Maybe she should have picked guys that didn't, puff away like a fucking chimney. She was retired when my father showed up at her door. So essentially what happened was he was 5. Again, I suggest you go listen to the prior live stream where I read his email and talk about more in-depthly the issues that he went through. But essentially his father went to live with his mother because his mother, his actual mother, who wasn't there, left when he was 5 because she was a deadbeat mom and a drunk. So showed up at her door when he was 5, and I'm certain she had thought she was done raising kids. She could have said no. She could have turned him away. So he goes on to say, helping him, meaning her son, raise 2 kids under 5 years old, meaning him and his brother, at 65 years of age is not going to produce positive results. Why not? That doesn't make any sense, of course, right? That's like saying, well, if over the age of 65 you wash your car, you're going to do a bad job at it. What? Wait a second. What are you talking about? Why? Why would somebody doing anything over the age of 65 necessarily mean you're going to be bad at it? In fact, I would think that with all those years of experience, unless we're talking about running a fucking marathon, I would think it would mean you'd be much better at it because you have much more experience to draw upon. So this just sounds like you making excuses. It sounds like the same kind of apologetics I hear whenever I debate a religious person about whether God exists. And they give me nonsense like, well, you can't have nothing, you can't have something come from nothing, right? Okay, well, then where did God come from? Well, he's excluded. He's excluded from my rule. Special pleading argument. Okay, so it sounds like the kind of apologetics I hear from Christians. But anyway, okay, you want to make excuses so you don't have to deal with it, so you don't have to delve deeper into what a horrible parent this grandma is, who even though she took on the role of being your mother, she refused to be your mother. Lovely. He goes on to say she was not there to be our mother. Well, what was she there for then? She was there to get us to school and make sure we were fed, and anything else was a bonus. I don't, again, that makes no sense. You're just equivocating. I suggest you look up the word equivocate so you know what it means. You're doing a lot of it. I do not fault my grandmother for her actions. Why not? See, again, I don't understand this. If somebody takes on a responsibility and then does a shitty job, well, then they're absolutely, positively, 100% responsible for their actions. You don't fault her. Well, you oughta. Could she have been a better mother figure? Sure. Yeah, from what you told me before, she stank at it. So, in fact, not only was she bad at it, but it seems like she did everything she could to make it into a very negative, pejorative experience. Why would you not fault her? I don't get this. I mean, if it was me, and I had kids, and then 20 years down the road from now, or 15, at age 65 or 67, whatever, my son or daughter showed up with their kid, and I took on that responsibility because I could say no, but I took it on. I would do my very best to make the best of it. I would give those kids all the love and support they could get. I would do my best to make up for the missing parent, and I would enjoy the experience because kids are great. I think. I love kids, by the way. So, this woman didn't love kids, but she had 5 of them. I don't get it. So, your words don't make any sense. So what you're saying is she did the worst job she possibly could, and instead of making it a positive experience, she chose to make it into a negative. But I don't fault her for that, even though she could have chosen to make it a positive experience. So you don't, I don't understand your logic. It seems to me like you're trying to hide from the truth and essentially spare her any kind of agency or responsibility for her actions, probably because you don't want to look any deeper at the things that she did and how they affected you. Okay. Do I judge who she is? Based on the last 18 years of her life, I was lucky to have what I had, in my opinion. No, you weren't lucky. I don't know what this luck is. There's no such thing as luck, by the way. I was lucky. Yeah. Compared to what? Right? I've never understood this kind of reasoning. So, because there were other people in the world who had it worse than me, that justifies this person's negative actions. Because they weren't as bad or evil as some others might have been. I don't understand that. That makes no sense, of course. Again, more equivocation. What? Okay. Yeah, it makes no sense, but I'll move on. He goes on to say, my father was better when we were younger. Again, I don't know what that has to do with anything. Okay, he was great when I was 5, but when I was 6, he became a real asshole and spent 13 years being a crappy father. I don't. Okay, what does that? What does that mean? What does that have to do with anything? How does the first 5 years make up for the last 13? I really don't get it. But after his brother died when he was 32 and his son was convicted of murder shortly after, that had a significant impact on his emotional state. Because he was a woman. Because he was more a woman than a man. Blue-pilled, soy boy type. Yeah, you objected to me saying that, but come on. Emotional impact. Men are logical, critical, reasonable. We're not emotional beings. We're not meant to be emotional beings anyway. But, of course, if we're raised without a father, raised by a single mother, or raised without the influence of a father, somebody to teach us how to direct and channel our emotions and control them and not be emotional beings, then you're going to end up being an emotional creature, and then your emotions impact your actions in your daily life. And so this guy that was your father, he let his emotions control him instead of the other way around, and in turn he ended up being a very poor father. But I don't blame him for that. Well, who are you going to blame? Santa Claus? the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Who are you blaming? I blame no one. Okay, interesting. Goes on to say he closed up, being a single parent. Wait a second, he wasn't a single parent. He had his mother to help. the mother who essentially, and I need to ask you more questions. Was she abusive? Did she hit you? Was she verbally abusive? There's so many questions and things I need to answer. But even without knowing those things, from what you told me, she was a very cold, distant, maybe even a nasty woman. But she was still there, right, as a parental figure. So he wasn't a single parent, all right? You're just making more excuses for the guy. Being a single parent, having to pay for 2 kids in daycare would not have been feasible for him at that time, right? So he enlisted grandma to be a second parent, parental figure, a job that she took on, but did badly. So you excuse her of that by saying she wasn't a parent at all, even though she chose to have that position. All right, I don't get it. So he goes on to say he was still in his 20s, so he did rely on his mother to help him, but calling him a cuck, I called his father I might use the word cuck about the father. I thought this guy was a man, a red-pilled man, so, I didn't think such harsh, truthful language would hurt his feelings, but, he's much like his father, who was also himself very like a woman, so this guy lets his emotions control him too much, which explains why he essentially had 3 kids with 2 separate women and was married to neither of them, and neither relationship worked out. But you called him a cuck, and that was far from the truth, and I wish you hadn't used that term as loosely as you did. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Thought I was talking to a man, excuse me. No one has a manual on raising kids. More excuse making for your father. I don't get this. How hard is it to be? Let me explain something to you, okay? It's not that hard to be a parent. You don't need a manual. Kids are little people. They're people. The golden rule applies, right? So don't do things to them you wouldn't want done to you, and they don't know anything. 2 rules you need to be a good parent, okay? Foundational. 1, they're little people, okay? So you don't own them per se. And 2, they're your responsibility and they're your rewards, so your job is to guide them, okay? Those are foundational rules, all right? So if you have those as your foundations, you build upon them. So it's your job to guide them. Hence, you need boundaries to a certain extent. You have to put limits on their behavior, and those limits change as they grow older. And when they reach certain ages, you give them more responsibility that is in line with their age. And you base this upon what you know about your kids. So if you don't know them very well, you can't very realistically put boundaries on their behavior and give them responsibilities in line with what they can handle, because you don't know what they can handle because you might not know them so well, which is part of the problem this guy's having, because he has 3 kids by 2 different women, and he has custody, from what I understand, of neither of them, and he's not very close to them, so it's very difficult for him to do these kind of things, i.e. being a good parent. But being a good parent, it's not overly complex. It's rather simple. By the way, simple doesn't mean easy. Simple is not a synonym for easy, but it is a simple matter. You've overcomplicated it because, you're more a woman than a man. Sorry if you don't like to hear the truth, but that's the truth. You're too much, you're too much like a female, too emotional. Women are emotional, men are logical and reasonable. It doesn't mean we don't necessarily have emotions, but they don't control us the way they control you. Evidenced by the fact that you got your feelings hurt when I spoke the truth about your father. Because only the truth hurts. If I had been wrong and lied, or if I had been incorrect in what I was saying, you wouldn't have gotten upset. He goes, so he goes on to say, I don't fault him for his actions either. Well, then who do you fault? You got to start laying blame on people, man. You got to start being realistic and making others accept responsibility for their actions. Because if you don't do that, how are you ever going to be able to accept responsibility for your own actions and failures, which is part and parcel of what this is about. You're so much like your father. You're very, very much like your father from what I've seen. So, of course, you want to abdicate him of any responsibility, because in doing so, you also don't have to accept responsibility for your actions or failures, even though you might pay lip service to doing so. You really don't want to on a deep, fundamental level. So that's why you try to avoid giving him any responsibility for his failures, because in turn, you're able to abdicate responsibility yourself. So he goes on to say, oh boy, here we go. All right, interesting. He goes on to say that when you start expecting things from people is when you open yourself up to disappointment. Only if you choose to associate with the wrong people. Only when you choose the wrong people to associate with, which means there's a flaw in the mechanisms you use and the standards you have for choosing those people that are close to you. The problem isn't with expecting things from others, it's expecting the wrong things from certain people because they're not capable of meeting those expectations because you chose the wrong people to associate with. So there's something fundamentally wrong with how you choose those people that will be in your life, okay? There's nothing wrong with having expectations of others so long as they're realistic expectations. So that's the problem. He goes on to say that I'm no one's judge. Oh, boy. What are you, a Christian? Good Lord. Christians get it wrong too, by the way. You need to judge other people. What are you talking about? Why do you think we have the capability to judge others? So that we don't do it? No, you have to judge others. Otherwise, how are you going to come to any kind of conclusions about whether or not they're worthy or worth having in your life or not? Well, I'm not going to judge other people. Because you don't want to judge yourself. You don't want to look too closely at yourself. You see, what people fail to realize is that when they say something like, I don't want to judge other people, what they're really saying is, I don't want to judge me. That's all it is. It's all it is. The only way that you can be aware of the flaws others possess is to be aware of your own. Self-awareness leads to self-knowledge, which leads to knowledge of others as well. And if you're afraid to look at the flaws of others, it means that you're afraid to look at your own flaws as well. So this talk about, I don't want to judge others, is bullshit. It's just you proclaiming that you don't want to have a higher level of self-awareness, because if you do, then you might be forced to look at your own flaws, which, by the way, is the only way that you can recognize the flaws in others. Know thyself, and you will know others. Don't know yourself, you won't know others either, let alone be able to judge them, which, by the way, might be why you have such low-quality people in your life and why you chose such low-quality women to be with. Anyway, excuse me. He goes on to say that being aware of what impacted my life is one thing. Criticizing someone on theirs is not something I benefit from. Sure it is, but to do it, you'd have to be able to criticize yourself as well, and you have to be able to realistically recognize those aspects of self that you should be critical of. He goes on to say it's difficult to speak to children about serious topics. No, it's not. No, it's not. I disagree. It's only difficult to speak to your children about difficult topics if you don't have any real, deep, meaningful connection with them. That's what makes the topics difficult. If you have an actual, deep, meaningful relationship with those kids, those topics will not be difficult at all. The difficulty comes from the lack of connection with your kids. Not because the topic itself is difficult. I don't believe that the majority of parents have this trait mastered. Of course, you want to believe that. Let me explain something to you, okay? I don't care how many parents you know and who say they have this problem. You know what that means? They have dysfunctional family units. Okay? If pedophilia became normalized tomorrow and everybody in the mother was macking on little kids, it would still be dysfunctional. You can normalize dysfunction, but that doesn't make it not dysfunction. So he goes on to say, it would have helped if my parents set an example for me to follow in this area, but pointing out the issue is one thing and coming up with a solution is another. I'm still waiting for a solution. Well, self-knowledge and self-awareness would be a good place to start. And the type of defensiveness that you showed in the prior email, as well as in our first conversation, is kind of a big part of the problem. Yeah. He goes on to say, you mentioned on your show and in the email below that I was combative. Wrong word. I should have said defensive, but it's a form of combative nature and combativeness in conversation. And that I made a derogatory comment. I don't recall either. Well, I don't need to get into that, but you made mention of me as I was searching, grasping for possible causes of the issues you were having, or a specific issue, you made reference to me sounding like a woman or something, and that was, I would think that's derogatory. It certainly was in the context of the conversation, but it's neither here nor there. He goes on to say, you state below, in my last email, you said, until you understand the cause and effect of all the issues you're having, you'll never solve much of anything. So what do you recommend? Becoming as red-pilled as possible to your own nature, which means halting, making a conscious choice to stop being afraid to hear the truth about yourself. Until you stop being afraid of hearing the truth, you'll never be able to face that truth. And until you're able to face that truth, you can't solve the problems that stem from those truths. He goes on to say, I acknowledge that I had a dysfunctional childhood, which is causing my current issues. That's what I said. I agree with me having a dysfunctional childhood and believe it absolutely has an effect on my current family life. Now, what to do about it? I just told you. He goes on to say, I appreciate your take on my life, and I am open to continuing the discussion, but maybe let me know what questions you intend to ask. No way. I reckon you're probably a pretty good manipulator. I got that just from talking to you. You're very evasive, and of course, it's important to a certain extent to be a good manipulator, to grow up in a dysfunctional, even abusive household, because you have to be very good at tiptoeing around and exercising some control over the emotions of the abusive or dysfunctional people in your household, so that you can at least exercise some control over their very random nature, right? People who grow up in dysfunctional, abusive households tend to become very good at manipulations of situations and others, because it's the only way they can have some control over the situation. But yeah, I'm not going to send you questions that I'm going to ask you on the show. Now, I might send you questions in regards to facts, right? I might send you some questions in regards to factual happenings in your past. Did this happen? Did that happen? But, other questions that are not based on 100%, factual happenings in your childhood. No, come on, man. All right, so he goes on to say, I hate to rant on your show, and I want okay, he's just making some excuses here about why he was defensive. So he finishes by saying it can be a large undertaking diving into the issues of people, blah, blah, blah. I thought maybe okay, more excuses. Yeah, so, all right, that's it. This may be too difficult to do when it comes to analysis. Not really. But you can always analyze what you want and then request more information in a follow-up call. Let me tell you something. I ain't no shrink, and men don't need shrinks. If women had the ability to use logic, reason, critical thinking as men do, they wouldn't need them either, but they're very overly emotional, so maybe they do, I don't know. But men don't need shrinks, all right? Maybe modern-day men, because so many of them are like women. Act like women, or overly emotional, like yourself. So the answer is to embrace your critical side, your critical nature, and to stop giving so much power to your emotions. And these are all choices. You choose to feel fear. You choose to feel anger. You choose to feel hate. And you choose to make these things grow and blossom. The more power you give to them, the stronger they become, until they affect your actions and eventually take control of said actions. So that's one of your major problems, and something I would suggest you work on. Also, we could talk more, and I would send you some questions facts essentially, that I need to know about your childhood and early life and things that happened between your exes, who are now the mothers of your kids, who your initial email said you were afraid to talk to about feminism, meaning he was afraid to talk to his kids about feminism because they didn't want to come across as an angry, evil white man. And there's so many issues that I saw that might be underlying that, which is why I opened up a dialogue about your past and childhood to begin with. And turns out I was right. There are a lot of underlying issues, of course. You don't end up being afraid to talk to your kids, having almost no connection with them, without having a very dysfunctional early life yourself. So these are all things we can talk about, And there's a lot of questions I'd like to ask you of a factual nature that I could send you a questionnaire on, which then would give me a much better idea of where to go during our online live conversation. And that's something we can do. I'd also ask that you consider making a donation to my Perp Peace podcast. I post 3 of these live call-in shows a week on my Patreon. You can donate as little as $1 or $2 or $5 an episode, whatever. I really need the help. As I said at the start of the show, I want to do much more for men. I want to expand my production capabilities. So if you're able to support me in that way, expand that support, that'd be great. And in return, I would love to explore these issues more with you and give you some more of my insight. So consider doing that, and I'd be very open to talking to you more about these issues. I think that's it for the show. Nobody's called in. Nobody has any comments. So I guess I'll end the show on that note of addressing John's email. So again, I suggest you go and check out the prior live call-in show where I commented on John's initial email to me. I think it's entitled... well, what the hell is it entitled? I'm not going to go look right now, but it's about a father concerned. The gist of the title is Father Concerned About His Exes Indoctrinating His Kids into Feminism. So go to my video library and check out that TRP, The Realist Philosopher call-in show, to get some more context so you know better about what I'm talking about in regards to this fellow, who's a very nice guy and in every other way very functional in his life. It's just in his relationships that he's having some issues, and I'd like to help him improve and deal with and move past those issues. And if you'd like to engage my aid in that regard, feel free to send me an email with a yay or nay, and I'll send you those questions. Alrighty, everybody, I'm going to end the show on that note. If you would like, and if like John, you would like to get my opinions, my assessments, a more in-depth understanding of what issues you might be having, be them work-related, female-related, feminist-related, relationship-related, childhood-related, early childhood trauma-related, whatever. I am actually capable of tact, but I'm also very honest. But I can be sensitive to your issues and such, but I'm also going to be very honest. And if you try to essentially manipulate or avoid issues, I'm going to hone right in on that and make you have to face it. So I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. I'm tough and firm, but I'm fair. So if you'd like to actually solve whatever issues, whatever conflicts you might be having in your life, be it relationship or work-based, feel free to send me an email at admin@therealistphilosopher.com. That's ADMIN at therealistphilosopher.com. That's also my website, therealistphilosopher.com. And if you'd like to help me in my efforts to help men help themselves and become more fully actualized, self-actualized human beings who can reach their fullest potential and find happiness in life without the need or validation of approval from anyone else outside of themselves, that all you need is you, then please feel free to donate at therealistphilosopher.com/donate. That's therealistphilosopher.com/donate. As I said, I want to expand onto other platforms. Many of them are paid, as well as a 24/7 radio call-in show. Well, not a radio call-in show. At the moment, it would be radio call-in when I would do a show, but it would be 24/7 material content, all for men. It's not cheap, so I need more of you out there to kick in to help me fund that. And that's it. And also, if you don't want to... And also, the call-in number can also be used at any time to discuss any subject while the show is going, so don't be afraid to interrupt a rant or when I'm talking about a subject specifically. Don't be afraid to call in, and if I'm talking to someone else, you are able to still call in, and that person can be put on hold, or I can put you on hold. So, yeah. And again, if you have just a question and don't want to talk directly, that's fine. You can just email it to me. And you'll find all my social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Gab, Instagram, So add me on those platforms. Whenever I post a new video on YouTube or I'm doing one of these shows, I always post an announcement beforehand. So it's a good way to keep up on the content I'm posting. Alrighty, y'all, I'm going to head out. I'm the Realist Philosopher, and I wish you a good day. Take care.